But she chose not to be here.
Judge, can you hear me? Oh, okay.
Yes, you saw it right. The judge literally walked out mid-hearing after one of Blake Lively's ex-employees dropped a bombshell that nearly sent the courtroom into cardiac arrest. What started as a he said, she said drama about workplace harassment just turned into a full-blown survival story involving scissors, bleach, and a locked supply closet. At this point, Blake isn't defending herself. She's accidentally confessing to new crimes every time someone speaks. Now, you might be wondering, how is Blake Lively's trial, which was supposed to start in 2026, already blowing up headlines in 2025? Well, buckle up, because what happened 2 days ago wasn't the trial. It was the pre-trial evidentiary hearing, and trust me, it was messier than you can imagine. This was supposed to be a quiet, procedural day in court, the kind where both legal teams calmly outline their initial positions. No media frenzy, no public testimony, no scandal. Just the defense team, the prosecution, a judge, and a few clerks reviewing documented facts. That's it. Until it wasn't. Present were attorneys from both sides, Blake Lively's high-profile legal team on one end, and representatives of 5 former employees tied to her now-defunct lifestyle brand, Preserve, on the other. The judge, Honorable Curtis M. Lennox, a seasoned federal court veteran, walked in with a case summary and a strict agenda. This wasn't a trial to determine guilt. It was a Rule 26-F conference, meant to establish the timeline for discovery, clarify the scope of allegations, and identify any materials either side may have failed to disclose. And right there, that's where it all unraveled. Just minutes before closing remarks, as the judge requested final clarifications from both sides, a woman in the gallery, one of the unnamed plaintiffs in the sealed employment case, stood up uninvited and dropped a bombshell that no one saw coming. She broke court protocol. She wasn't scheduled to speak. Her own lawyers looked blindsided. With visible distress, she began recounting a previously undocumented incident from 2015 during a Preserve company retreat held in Aspen. According to her testimony, Blake Lively herself threw a wine glass across the room during a heated argument over marketing deadlines. The glass allegedly struck the woman's shoulder, causing a deep laceration. Hospital records later confirmed 6 stitches and nerve bruising.
And they were paid hush money, apparently, and Leslie Sloan, Blake Lively's publicist, and Ryan Reynolds' publicist, helped bury this.
But here's the part that flipped the courtroom upside down. The woman claimed Blake's team paid her $40,000 in hush money to prevent a formal complaint and had her sign a non-disclosure agreement, NDA, under duress. She didn't name sources. She didn't have documents in hand. But she did reference Preserve's internal HR incident log, which, by the way, has not been submitted to the court yet, as well as internal Slack messages where employees allegedly joked about Blake's temper. The courtroom froze. A federal officer moved to escort her, but the judge, instead of ordering silence, paused. He turned to both legal teams and asked the question that likely changed this case forever. Were either of you aware of this incident or any other injuries tied to the defendant's conduct and chose not to disclose it? The room was silent. What followed next was courtroom whiplash. Blake's defense team mumbled about irrelevant character evidence, while the prosecution began flipping through their folders like they'd just uncovered a golden ticket. Judge Lennox, a man known for his restraint, lost it. Slamming his gavel twice, he stood and verbally reprimanded both legal teams for violating court protocol, delaying full discovery, and potentially engaging in intentional concealment of material facts. And just when we thought it couldn't spiral further, he walked out, in front of everyone. He didn't recess. He didn't issue an adjournment. He stood up and said, quote, "If this is the level of integrity I'm expected to work with, then you're wasting federal time. This is not Hollywood. It's federal court." And he left. So, what does this mean? First, the hearing is officially suspended. The judge is reviewing both teams for contempt of court, meaning if either side knowingly withheld damaging evidence or allowed false statements into the record, they could be sanctioned. Second, the court is considering unsealing several elements of the Preserve Workplace lawsuit, which includes internal communications, financial records, and possibly medical files related to multiple injuries sustained by former staff between 2013 and 2016. And third, the narrative around Blake Lively just shifted from celebrity caught in a toxic workplace to possible perpetrator of workplace violence and cover-up. Not a good look for someone trying to frame themselves as a victim of Hollywood's darker forces. To summarize, this wasn't a meltdown. It was a legal firestorm with more smoke than a PR firm can extinguish. Blake Lively walked into that hearing as a concerned co-founder. She left as someone who may now face civil liability, witness tampering allegations, and potentially obstruction of justice, all before her actual trial even begins. But if you thought the wine glass incident was just another juicy footnote in an already bloated case file, think again. Because the moment that victim stood up in court and started talking, this case flipped from celebrity workplace drama to something far more sinister: corporate misconduct, bribery, and potential criminal negligence. The woman, still unnamed in the court documents, made it very clear that this wasn't about one incident. No, this was about an entire culture of manipulation built around Blake Lively's failed brand Preserve. You remember Preserve, right? That overpriced digital flea market that tried to sell farm jam and linen aprons as aspirational living? The same company that folded under mysterious circumstances just 2 years after launch. Yeah, that one. Well, according to this ex-employee, the collapse wasn't just due to bad business. It was allegedly fueled by toxic internal practices, abuse of power, and a very strategic use of legal silencing tactics. Here's what we now know. Employees were chronically underpaid, worked 60 to 80-hour weeks, and were routinely threatened with termination if they questioned executive decisions, especially those involving budget cuts, branding failures, or Blake's increasingly erratic behavior. That's the word she used. Erratic. And it gets worse. She claimed that several employees who either tried to quit or file HR complaints were given severance packages, a nice-sounding term for cash bribes tied to NDAs. In layman's terms, hush money. Allegedly orchestrated not just by PR managers, but with Blake's full awareness and signature. Yes, actual documents with her initials allegedly exist. Whether they make it into evidence is a whole other storm waiting to erupt. But let's go back to the most explosive part of her testimony: the Aspen dinner. We're talking about an executive dinner hosted during Preserve's 2015 winter planning retreat. According to her sworn statement, the team was discussing a failed collaboration with an influencer brand when tensions rose. Blake, reportedly furious over missed press targets, allegedly threw a full glass of red wine across the table. It struck the woman's right shoulder and shattered, slicing through her blouse and leaving a gash near her collarbone. 6 stitches, nerve bruising, and trauma. She was rushed to a local clinic under a fake name, billed as a kitchen accident. The records were buried. Her contract was reworked. 2 weeks later, she was handed a $40,000 settlement check in exchange for signing an NDA, allegedly pushed by Blake's personal legal consultant. Intentional harm? Coercion? The courtroom didn't need to say it. The implication was clear. You could hear a pin drop. The judge didn't interrupt. No bailiff moved. It was that moment in every scandal where the air changes. The media team in the back row, typing like their lives depended on it. The prosecution's junior associates, whispering, visibly stunned. And Blake? According to someone seated 3 rows back, she looked pale, like she knew what was coming next. Because this wasn't an accusation. This was a federal violation waiting to be formalized. Workplace injury concealment, witness silencing, potential obstruction, and this was only the second chapter of the day. But just when we thought Blake Lively's legal headache couldn't get any messier, enter Bernie. Or, as he's now known in court documents, Bernard Collins, executive producer, creative director, and apparently the walking HR violation behind Preserve's closed doors. Originally, the narrative positioned Bernie as the rogue figure in the story. You know, the cliché, power-hungry exec accused of sexually harassing junior employees while management allegedly didn't know a thing. For months, that's how the media sold it. Bernie was the fire, and Blake was just standing near the smoke. Except, that version of the story just blew up, because new testimonies from multiple former employees, now admitted into the record after the court's meltdown last week, show that Blake wasn't just aware of Bernie's behavior. She was allegedly encouraging it, mocking complaints behind closed doors, and strategically protecting him because he made the company look creative and edgy. Let that sink in. This wasn't about ignorance. This was about image management. Courtroom Exhibits 27 and C30 include screenshots from internal Slack threads, messages between Blake and Bernie, where she referred to a junior employee's harassment complaint as overblown sensitivity, and here comes the quote, "Keep her on the payroll, she photographs well, good optics." Yes, really. Good optics. Another message shows her joking about a staffer quitting over his Bernie's vibes and writing, "She didn't get the culture. We're not Whole Foods." And while her attorneys tried to argue the messages were taken out of context or not, it doesn't look good. Because what those screenshots reveal is a leader not just ignoring workplace abuse, but possibly weaponizing it for branding purposes. But wait, Bernie's side made it even worse. In a rare statement outside court, Bernie's lawyer, Calvin Dre, spoke to the press and dropped a nuke of his own. He claimed Blake was not only complicit, but that her office orchestrated narrative control when allegations began brewing internally in 2016. According to him, his client, now apparently flipping to save himself, was told to keep certain liabilities on contract for appearance's sake, and that Blake's team handled any potential leak by buying silence. You know what that means? Bernie might testify against Blake, and that changes everything. Because now, the case isn't about one bad man in the company. It's about a system allegedly created by Blake herself. A toxic workplace culture where manipulation, gaslighting, and selective silence weren't accidents. They were policy. We've officially shifted from a civil labor dispute to what legal experts are now calling a corruption web. And the prosecution? They're loving it. The minute those chat logs were verified and submitted, their tone changed. They're no longer just defending a group of mistreated employees. They're preparing a case that could potentially lead to felony charges if Blake is proven to have covered up harassment knowingly. The question isn't whether Bernie's guilty. It's how long Blake was protecting him, and how far she went to keep the brand's image sparkling while her staff silently crumbled. And just when that fire started to rage, another bomb dropped. This time from Blake's personal life, because of course it did. If there's one thing that could make this courtroom scandal even more dramatic, it's Taylor Swift. Yes, her. Because according to newly leaked texts, Blake Lively tried to pull her longtime friend into the mess, and when Taylor said no, Blake lost it. Here's how it unraveled. As the pressure around Preserve mounted, Blake allegedly reached out to Taylor privately, not just for emotional support, but to publicly defend her in the press. In simple terms, Blake wanted Taylor to make a statement painting her as an unaware CEO who had nothing to do with the workplace abuse, and Taylor, wisely, declined. She reportedly said she wasn't in a position to comment on a legal matter and that it wouldn't be fair to the women involved. Sounds diplomatic, right? Apparently not for Blake. Because what followed next was a chain of private text messages that were later leaked via encrypted backup logs, now under review as admissible evidence. In them, Blake tells Taylor, "After a decade, you owe me. If you walk away now, don't expect me to fix what happens to your name when I speak up. I defended you in rooms that would have buried you. And finally, this friendship lives or dies by loyalty." Taylor's response? one sentence. That's not how loyalty works. The texts were allegedly leaked by a former Preserve marketing executive who had access to Blake's PR coordination team and was recently subpoenaed by the court. He claims the messages were being used by Blake's handlers to pressure Taylor into a statement. As a last-ditch PR move, before media coverage turned fully against Blake. So now the courtroom isn't just dealing with legal fallout, it's dealing with a celebrity implosion. The judge, reportedly already fuming from the Bernie scandal, paused proceedings once the messages were brought up and stated on record that the defense was attempting to use public perception as legal leverage. That's not just unethical, it borders on witness manipulation depending on how the messages were sent and shared. And the public? Oh, they noticed. The moment the Swift Lively texts hit social media, Twitter was on fire. Swifties flooded the timeline with comparisons to past betrayals, calling it the ultimate snake reveal. Even neutral commentators began questioning just how far Blake was willing to go to salvage her narrative. Because here's what it revealed. This wasn't just a case about a company, or even a CEO. It's about someone allegedly so desperate to protect their reputation, they were willing to throw friendships, victims, and legal protocol under the bus. And for Taylor Swift, someone notoriously protective of her public image, the betrayal wasn't just personal, it was strategic. Blake allegedly tried to use Taylor's credibility as a shield, and when it didn't work, she weaponized the friendship like a legal bargaining chip, which, to be honest, might be the most damning detail yet. Because you can explain away legal documents, you can spin court filings, but you can't unsend a threat to your best friend. This case is no longer confined to legal journals. It's bled into pop culture, power politics, and personal morality. And if this is how far Blake went behind closed doors, imagine what else is still waiting to surface. Now, if there was ever a moment where the Blake Lively case crossed the point of no return, it was here. The courtroom wasn't just tense anymore. It was boiling. And the pot boiled over the minute the judge caught Blake's legal team playing hide and seek with actual federal evidence. You see, for weeks, the defense had been pushing this fantasy that Blake had no knowledge of settlements paid out to former Preserve employees. According to her sworn testimony, there were no private payments made to silence or settle disputes. A very clean and polished statement. Too clean, as it turns out. Because when Judge Lennox demanded the full financial documentation of Preserve's operating years, the defense handed over a tidy, redacted report that conveniently left out all the numbers the prosecution was specifically looking for. Key sections were blacked out, names were missing, entire pages were practically invisible. Now, redactions in corporate trials aren't illegal by themselves. But when the same exact documents appear in unredacted form from a whistleblower on the prosecution's side, and those documents show 5 separate hush money payments totaling over $200,000, we've officially entered obstruction territory. The judge didn't even try to stay composed at that point. He asked the defense to explain why their version of the document didn't include any mention of those payments. Their response? A bland excuse about clerical discretion, which might have worked in a fashion scandal, but absolutely doesn't fly in a courtroom, especially not one where the federal gavel is swinging. This wasn't just sloppy. This was calculated. Submitting altered financial records in a federal hearing is grounds for contempt, and Blake's legal team was suddenly facing that exact reality. But it didn't stop there. The prosecution hit back harder, revealing that 2 of the original Preserve complainants, who had already submitted testimonies, were mysteriously contacted by Blake's people after their court submissions. And not just contacted, we're talking friendly check-ins, offers of image consulting, NDA renegotiations, and in one case, the sudden appearance of a social media reputation agency offering to scrub old tweets. None of this was random. It was an orchestrated attempt to manage witnesses, soft bribery masked as damage control, legal manipulation pretending to be PR. Judge Lennox slammed his gavel, stood up, and for the second time in 2 weeks, stormed out of the courtroom. His parting shot? This is not a sandbox for celebrity image control. This is a court of law, and what you've brought in here is an intentional mockery of legal due process. And just like that, he vanished through the chamber doors, leaving a room full of stunned lawyers, exhausted reporters, and one actress whose career was unraveling faster than the press could type. The consequences were immediate. Legal analysts began speculating that Blake's entire team could be sanctioned. There were whispers of California State Bar investigations, ethics complaints, potential criminal referrals. Because this wasn't about defending a celebrity anymore. It was about protecting the integrity of the court. And at this point, Blake's defense looked less like a legal team and more like a PR operation pretending to follow the law. The redacted documents, the tampered witnesses, the blatant contradictions, it wasn't just shady. It was strategic, it was deliberate, and it was caught. Outside the courtroom, the fallout hit like a digital tsunami. The moment news broke of the redacted documents and the judge's walkout, the internet exploded. Within an hour, hashtags like Blake, exposed, justice for preserved victims were trending worldwide. And this time, it wasn't just Twitter trolls or gossip blogs. Verified accounts, journalists, former co-stars, even low-key celebrities were chiming in. And the tone? It was brutal. Blake Lively, once seen as the down-to-earth, effortlessly chic Hollywood sweetheart, was now being rebranded by the public as a manipulative, image-obsessed tyrant who allegedly built her empire on intimidation and NDAs. Gone were the Instagram comments calling her queen. Now it was liar, fraud, and the female Weinstein with better lighting. And while that might sound extreme, let's be honest. The evidence coming out didn't exactly paint her as misunderstood. It painted her as someone who, at best, turned a blind eye to abuse, and at worst, actively ran a machine that punished victims and gaslit truth tellers. And now it's clear, Blake Lively's fall from Hollywood's golden girl to courtroom cautionary tale is no longer a twist. It's the final act.